Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Table Talk. This is week 2 of Table Talk from Liberty Hill Church. And we are going to do a little talking about what's going on at our church right now during this weird time that we're in, and also talk about some questions from Sunday's message that may have come up. So give us a little update on where we are in our church right now and what's going on.
Well, I think as most of you know by now, our local schools have pushed back the date in which they're going to be reopening, and we do not have a target date in mind as to when we're going to be having church services live and in our building again for a while. We're just going to keep pushing back that date also, and we're going to be flexible as to when we can plan on getting back together. We know that that's going to make this a very weird Easter for all of us. This Sunday is Palm Sunday.
Right.
Sunday that usually is a big day for us as a church because our kiddos get to come together and sing, and we enjoy communion and worship together as a family. So this certainly is going to be the weirdest Palm Sunday, and then the next Sunday, Easter Sunday, that I probably ever had in my life.
Right.
We know that there's just limited things that we can do in our particular culture as a church, in our particular environment. So we definitely are looking at church online for the next few weeks, and that will include Easter. Now, one thing that we did talk about that we're going to do that's kind of fun. We think it's kind of fun. If you think it's kind of dumb, don't tell me about it. Just play along and humor me. For Easter, a lot of families like to get together and like to have their big Easter family portraits.
Right.
Where everybody's got their new clothes. And well, what we want to do for Easter Sunday this year is we're going to encourage families that are staying at home and worshiping together to take your family pictures in your living room, in your PJs, or your TV watching clothes, whatever you're comfortable with, and share those to social media with the hashtag Liberty Hill PJs.
All right.
And that way all of our online family can see each other through social media and say, and then we'll look back on this Sunday and laugh, hopefully. But that's the plan. And I'll talk about that also this Sunday in church online, and then next week in Table Talk too, God willing, we'll get
And I
everybody
guess
up.
if people want to get on Amazon and buy brand new clothes that look awesome, they could do that too.
They can do that.
Or Zulily.
Keep that economy going.
Well, the thing is, the way things are right now, we can't really plan because everything is changing so fast. It's hard to know what the plan is going to be.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious now that the plan is to find a plan.
Right.
We can't make long-range plans. We know that because things are too flexible and too much is up in the air. But as a church, we know that there are some things that we're just going to consistently keep offering over the weeks ahead. On Monday of this week, we introduced our first online Hilltop Kids video. We also introduced our first Life Groups Online video, and we're going to be offering those up each week for the next few weeks to come. And then if people even, more than 2 people act like they're interested in Table Talk, we'll keep this going also. And then if we have the ability to resolve other problems or meet other ministry needs over the weeks ahead, we're going to do that.
Right.
We have been talking as a church, our leaders of the church, as to what we need to do financially as a church. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in Church Online Sunday, but we do have a financial plan for our church. Obviously, so many of our people financially are in tight situations, and that obviously is going to affect us as a church as well. Mm-hmm. We have a plan in place, and we'll talk a little bit more about that Sunday.
Okay.
We're thankful for where we are, but we recognize that we're tightening our belt too.
That's right. That's right. And we're always, at least I am, always looking forward to there's going to be a Sunday when we're all going to be back together in this room, and it's going to be a happy day.
It's going to be nice. It's going to be good to see everybody. I'm on social media, so I get to see at least some of you. I don't scroll through all of everything that's on there, so I know I've missed a lot of you. But man, it's just not the same as being able to worship together and see everybody. Gosh, I don't think you really know just how much that is a part of your life until it's taken away.
Yeah.
It's rough.
It is. All right. Well, you want to talk about Sunday's sermon a little bit?
Let's jump in. Yeah.
You were giving us some ways to look at life differently. Your first kind of point was that your perception is bigger than your issues. And it reminded me of this statement that I heard, I think is in politics actually. It's not what happens, it's how you react to it. And in what the way I heard what you were saying there is it's not what happens as much in life, it's how you look at what happens to you in your life. Am I on the right track with that?
No, you're not, Greg.
Oh, rats.
You're spot on. There's an old saying that says perception is reality. Now, philosophically, that's not true. Reality is reality. It doesn't blink. It doesn't change. It's facts don't care about your feelings kind of thing. But if I'm perceiving a set of facts a certain way, that is my mental and emotional reality.
Right.
So how I perceive something becomes real to me, even if it's wrong.
Right.
If I perceive something wrongly, then I'm reacting to it wrongly. Mm-hmm. No matter how right or how sincere I am. It's not an issue of, well, you're sincere, so that's what counts. Well, you could just be sincerely wrong.
Right.
So perception governs everything. And then even when we talk about our perception, it's not just our perception of one issue or two issues. It's what we perceive to be issues in the first place that need to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can so zero in on one or two things that we miss other important elements.
Right.
And we can react powerfully to an issue that moves us and can be so zoned in on that we miss other things that maybe change this element.
Right.
Or maybe need our attention even more vitally. But our perception is blinded. Uh-huh. You know, how many times do you drive down the road and maybe you're driving down the road and you think you're paying attention to your drive, but your mind has wandered.
Right.
And you've gone maybe 2 or 3 miles without noticing the countryside or even the color of the vehicle behind you or that sort of thing. You've just been blinded to them. I think that happens in life. Mm-hmm. We get zeroed in on one or two things, or our mind wanders and our perception takes us somewhere other than maybe where we need to be.
Right. You know, in the Bible lesson that you referenced, there was God's people were about to go into this land, and they brought back this amazing fruit. And it was like, this is an amazing land. We're going to be so prosperous here, except there are also the really big enemy army that they were going to have to fight.
Yeah.
And they could choose to look at the blessings that the land offered or the really big army that was there.
And I kind of, that's one of my favorite Bible stories, the story of, biblically speaking, it's the spies of Israel going out to look at the land of Canaan, the land that God promised.
Right.
It's a favorite story because it's so powerful in terms of what you see, where your faith reacts and all that. But what I kind of struggled with a little bit in this past week in working on this message was the fact that the people that came back and were upset, scared, frightened, they had a legitimate reason to be.
Right. Yes.
It wasn't like they were being ridiculous.
Right.
But it was a matter of what they focused in on. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's some carryover. Well, obviously, I think there's some carryover to our present situation with the chaos and fears of COVID-19. Is if you look at some things, you can say, you know what, I have reasons to be afraid. I have reasons to be concerned.
Right.
And your anxiety will rise. Well, then there was Caleb and Joshua who looked at all the blessings, all the potential, all the good that was within arm's reach. Uh-huh. And they had good reasons to be optimistic.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a mix of what is rational and reasonable, and also what are you believing at your core that's driving you in your life? Uh-huh. That's what I think really determines your perception. Your strongest beliefs determine your perception. And there were a sizable number of those leaders that came back from spying out that promised land, and they saw nothing of the good. They were overwhelmed with the bad, and they were filled with fear, and their reasonable fear began to be unreasonable.
Right.
And they said crazy things like, I wish we had just died in Egypt. Mm-hmm. If we go into this new land, we're going to die. I wish we had died in Egypt. You can't take our families in there. What's going to happen to our wives? What's going to happen to our children?
Right.
Let's go back to Egypt and be slaves again.
Yeah.
Totally unreasonable.
Yeah.
Totally. If they went back to Egypt, what was going to happen to their families?
Right. They would have been slaves or worse. Yes.
Yeah, they would lose their families.
Right.
So their ability to react rationally was gone. Their fears were increased by their perception.
That was something that you said. You said sometimes our beliefs will change when we get under stress. Like stress reveals what we truly believe. And it seems like these people who God had delivered in mighty ways, miraculous ways, when they were under stress, they went back to their old way of thinking and their fears that were too big in their face for them to see anything else.
Yeah, that's another hard thing too. I think that maybe for a lot of us, we come to a decision about what we believe, whether it's gradually or we have an awakening and we say, this is what I believe about God, about myself, about other people or the human race or whatever. And we say, this is what I believe. And we think we live and operate on a day-to-day basis with that belief. And maybe we do. Mm-hmm. But then when stress arises, you get under pressure, your beliefs change, they fluctuate. And the reason why is because your most recently adapted beliefs will be the ones that likely will be the quickly first released ones.
Right.
Because they're not deeply ingrained into your soul.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily a part of who you are. It doesn't mean they're not valid beliefs. It doesn't mean that you didn't sincerely hold them. It means that in times of panic, we don't go through a mental process or a checklist of saying, how does this match what I believe? Is this consistent with what I hold dear? We just react.
Right.
So however we have been shaped and formed for the longest period of time in our life tends to be what comes to the surface when we react under pressure.
Uh-huh.
So if we were in our formative years of life, if we were raised and shaped with a certain set of values or beliefs and we begin to live out those, then in times of pressure, that's what we revert back to.
Right.
It's kind of like the default mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes whenever we get panicky situations, we react intuitively out of that, and then we calm down, take a deep breath, and resort things out. That's why if you get mad at someone, maybe you get into it with your spouse or your parents or your children or whatever, you immediately say things that are hurtful. Mm-hmm. And then you come back later and you say, I am so sorry. That was uncalled for. I had no right to say that. It's because you spoke out of a certain panic or a certain anger or frustration that you didn't take the time to put through your filter of beliefs.
Right.
But then when you calm down, you got that filter back on and you said, that's not who I am. That's not the way I talk to people. And you made it right. I think that that's what we do with our beliefs. We sometimes in anxiety react intuitively and then maybe have to go back and resort things out. And I think in terms of our present crisis, that this is an important thing to do when we look at maybe what other people say, or maybe even in what we say. We really need to give each other a little bit of grace.
That's because I'm feeling pressure at times from what's going on, and you're feeling pressure at times from what's going on, and sometimes that pressure will cause me at home or here or somewhere to erupt in ways I might not, or say things I might not say normally.
Yeah.
And we do need to give each other grace at that time. And not just during this crisis, but at any time when the pressure is on, we need to understand someone else may be under pressure too.
Yeah. If we remember that we're all kind of in this, and especially with social media, where we can all just quickly post things and our feelings are coming to the surface. It's like we're living in a fishbowl sometimes with our emotions. If you're quick to express it, then the whole world sees it. And it's easy for us to become critical, judgmental, or even harsh with one another. If we don't think that they're doing the right thing or they're being responsible, it's easy for us to react negatively. But I think it's important for us to not just get, and I said this Sunday, I don't know how I said it, but the same concept. I think it's important for us to not just get through this crisis with our health intact. We want to get through this crisis with our relationships intact too.
Right.
Our relationships are just as much a part of our well-being as our physical health is. Mm-hmm. If we don't think so, then why are people getting so heartbroken about the fact that there are people in nursing homes that can't see their family?
Right.
or hospitals that they can't see their family. It's telling us your relationships matter. So we doggone better protect those.
Yes.
That's what matters most. Here's the unpleasant thing to think about. We're all going to expire at some point in time.
Right.
The things that matter ultimately most when our health begins to fade is the people around us. So if we alienate people or we inflict wounds on other people through the way we react to crisis or things we say and do, that can often be harder to save, rescue, or retrieve than our health can be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we can recover from illness a lot quicker than we can recover from wounds of the soul.
Right. Because someone pops off at you and they didn't really mean it and they come back and apologize, but it's still kind of there. It kind of sticks with you a little bit.
Yeah, you may want to forgive them, but man, it's still logged in the memory banks.
That's right. And one good thing that we were talking about in the office before we came to make this video was for a lot of families, this is a time for us to connect in ways that we haven't connected in a long time or never have quite connected this way. So it is a blessing that's coming through this medical crisis that we're getting some extra time with our families. Just our families.
That's a big point, and I think that's something that if we can focus on, it's helpful. This is changing everybody's schedule. Some people are working less because their jobs are put on hold, or they're quarantined, or they're considered non-essential. And you're all essential. Sorry.
You said considered.
Considered.
You put that.
Yeah.
You put that in there.
So it's for some people, they're sitting at home and they're spending a lot of hours at home now with nothing to do. And other people, their workload has just skyrocketed.
Right.
So there's no normal right now. Some people are carrying a workload that they sure
That's
didn't
true.
see coming a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So in all of this changing, shifting schedules, it does make us see what's most important. And if you have time at home under the roof with your families, man, make that count. Make those memories. Enjoy it.
Right.
And when this is all said and done, you've had an opportunity to do some things as a family that you would not have done any other way.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So as we talk about this and the people, they could not see the good that God had for them there in that promised land. And then, because all they could see was the giants that they were going to have to fight. And you made a good point. That was kind of a logical reaction. If you're going into a land that has a formidable army, that's a scary thing.
It is. Yeah.
What would you say? It seems like there's something they were missing how good the land was, but they were also missing how good God was in the whole situation. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think that's a good point, Greg. I think sometimes in life, especially if we've gone through difficult periods, the last thing we want is anything else that's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the people of Israel, in this story, they had been rescued from slavery. God was leading them from one place, getting them to another. And here they were in the wilderness, a place they couldn't stay. So they had to move forward or move back. And they chose to move back.
Right.
And that was a disaster. They were basically signing the death warrant for their families if they would do that. But when it came to the new land, the land that God said He would give them, they saw obstacles rather than God's promise.
Right.
And anytime things get difficult for us in life, it's easy for us to be overwhelmed by the difficulties and not focus on the fact that you can make it through the difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of us want to suffer. I don't think any of us like misery. We don't like doing hard things. But isn't it amazing how the most formative things in most of our lives have been the times when we've gone through hard things?
Right.
Where we've done things that maybe were miserable, unpleasant, challenging. How did they shape us? Develop our character, give us insight? I mean, most of us, we don't fundamentally change deep inside of our soul unless we have to.
Right.
And what Israel was being presented, an opportunity to trust God to get them through the obstacles, was God's way of getting Egypt out of them. Now, these people had grown up in slavery.
Right.
It was a part of the way they were thinking.
Right.
It was a part of the way they were living their life. How are you going to change that? Were you just going to give them lectures on stop thinking like slaves? No, there had to be something to fundamentally change the way they looked at life, their perception.
Right.
And the way to change their perception was to go through difficult things and then say, look, you could do that. You didn't think you could. You just thought these giants were going to slaughter you. You thought this was going to be too much for you, but look at you.
Right.
Here you are enjoying the grapes, the pomegranates, the figs, the land flowing with milk and honey. You almost missed this because you were afraid of doing something hard.
Right.
Man, sometimes in life, you've got to grit your teeth, flex your faith muscles, and say, God will get me through this. And who you are on the other side is someone you never imagined yourself that you could be.
Yes.
But that's where the triumph comes.
Yes.
Being able to trust God that He's going to give you what you need to get you through.
You have to, in our situations, we need to be realistic and see that there are armies that we're going to have to fight. We also need to be realistic and see there are some positives that come if we face that fight. Yeah. But the biggest thing is we need to see that God is right in there in the whole situation. If we are following Him, if we are going where He has led us, He is going to be with us through that time, and He's going to do what He has promised He would do.
Here's the way I think of it. If you want God to be with you in the promised land, then you want God to be with you when you choose to put your boots on and strap your sword on.
Right.
You want God to be with you in that preparation and getting there through the process to the promise.
Right.
And He will.
Exactly, yes.
If you want God to be there with a promise, then be there where you have to say, it's going to be worth it. He's going to get me through this.
Right. And when they finally got past this time of doubt, and to be honest, all the doubters died in the wilderness because of their doubt.
Yeah.
But when they finally got past that, then God miraculously gives them victories in their as they fight those giant armies with really big cities. And God does miraculous things to give them victory in that land.
Yeah, when the people who believed the promise actually did strap their boots and swords on,
Right.
they found out that, our God is fighting with us.
Right.
And that's the way it works in our day-to-day life. When you and I, we get ready to do the hard things because we believe God's going to get us through, it changes our perception. We recognize that problems are not brick walls we will never get through. They're obstacles that we will get through.
Right.
And they're going to be something we look back on and say, didn't God deliver us?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, anything else on your mind we need to share this afternoon as we talk to folks?
I'll say thank you to those of you that are tuning in online, those of you that are being a part of our online community that's growing. Thank you for making us a part of your church family. Difficult times for all of us. It's a weird time for all of us, but I like who we're becoming for the good in this. And I think that God's going to make something in our hearts and in our church that we didn't foresee a few months ago, but it's going to be nice when we look back on it. So keep praying, pray for one another, and love one another, and see what God does in us.
All right. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.